Welcome to Whispers of the Night. Tonight we ascend to the glittering heights of 1,920 Street Moritz, where Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings find winter repose, interrupted by a mysterious countess in lavender. Amid diplomats, pietists, and aging aristocrats, whispers of stolen secrets and false identities swirl like Alpine snow. Join us for The Lady in Lavender, a tale of espionage and deception at high altitude, crafted in homage to the masterful Agatha Christie, whose genius we honor, though this Swiss intrigue unfolds on our own terms. Before we begin, share in the comments. Where are you joining us from tonight? Your presence illuminates our journey through these shadowed mysteries. If this tale captivates your imagination, consider supporting us through our membership program, which includes access to ad-free versions of all our stories and exclusive content, or leave us a tip. Every contribution helps keep these mysteries alive in the darkness. Now, let the story unfold. Chapter 1. An Uncommon Countess. It was the winter of 1928, and against all expectation, I managed to lure my friend Hercule Poirot to the intimidating heights of St. Moritz. He came protesting for the good of the digestion, though I doubted he would set foot in the snow by choice. My own dreams were filled with exhilarating ski runs and the sting of mountain air. Poirot, meanwhile, arrived in immaculate patent leather shoes and 3 identical grey suits. Determined not to so much as scuff a soul, we settled into the grand Alpine Palace Hotel, where the corridors gleamed with marble and golden firelight. The place bustled with an innately expensive sort of energy. Behind each lift of a champagne flute, one sensed centuries of European drama gathering in silk and whispers. I fancied myself something of an amateur sleuth, but Poirot, always the professional, scrutinized luggage and staff with the air of a surgeon examining a fresh case. Outside, the wind howled against the windows. Inside, warmth wrapped around us like a velvet cloak. I could hardly imagine a place better suited to idle comfort until an unexpected note of tension entered the day. Midway through a languid afternoon, I was half lost in a rather tawdry adventure novel, while Poirot dissected the luncheon menu when she appeared. She seemed to glide rather than walk, tall and strikingly composed in flowing lavender, not the pale mauve of Parisian fashion, but a deep, nostalgic violet, suggestive of pressed petals and faded love letters. Even Poirot paused, his gaze sharpening. He lowered his menu, glasses glinting. "Tiana, that is not an ordinary woman. Hastings, she is lovely," I admitted, striving to sound detached, though she carried herself with such poised grace I could barely look away, like a painted portrait, if you'll permit. Men, no. Portraits do not walk. Poirot smiled at my comparison. "Still, she moves as one accustomed to being watched. Studied, perhaps." "Yes." Natural curiosity swept the room. Nearby, a mongreled Hungarian baron dropped his napkin. A Belgian banker coughed and sat again with no discernible purpose. Some silent current passed between the guests, knitting whispers together with remarkable speed. I had barely begun to wonder when a passing concierge, his voice pitched low, confirmed her identity to a chatty guest, the news rippling outward. Countess Helena von Schwartz. The name sparked no recognition in me, but Poirot's brow furrowed slightly. Von Schwartz, Austrian lineage, impeccable. But do you see that theatrical walk? Not quite the bearing of Vienna's court. Far too precise. I couldn't help but smile. You do spin a romance from little, my friend. She's only elegant. At that moment, the French ambassador Delaros, a dignified man rarely warm to anyone, entered with surprising haste and greeted her. He took her gloved hand and spoke with uncharacteristic warmth. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Curious," he murmured. "Delaros does not extend warmth quickly. If they have met, he is pretending otherwise. If not, he sees an opportunity." Before I could reply, we were summoned to luncheon. Poirot's appetite was sharp. For Saulmier, yes, but also for puzzles. The dining hall glittered with crystal and gossip. Poirot sat to my left. To my right, Elderly English ladies whispered cutting soup critiques. At the long centre table, the countess took her place, escorted by the very ambassador, an anxious Italian pianist, a bewisered retired colonel, and most fiercely Count Adele von Hohenberg, ancient, shrewd, swathed in a green shawl and bristling with scrutiny. "She does not approve," I whispered, watching the old woman's laser-like gaze. Poirot nodded. "No, she does not." The meal unfolded with strange hushes and glances cast toward Lavender. Even the waiters, practiced in invisibility, tripped in the Countess's orbit. Delarose murmured to her privately, but she replied mostly with nods, a Mona Lisa smile on her lips. Poirot, his cutlets untouched, seemed entirely absorbed by her every move, and curiously by the way she handled her glass. Notice Hastings, the left hand. Not by chance, perhaps. I blinked. "You're sure?" I observe. Pooh tapped his temple, refusing to elaborate. As coffee cooled in our cups, the Countess Vonwärts glided past our table. She met Poirot's gaze for a heartbeat, icy, unwavering. Neither smiled. Only then did Countess von Hohenberg rise and spear us with her falcon stare. She approached steady on a carved cane and fixed Pooh with her full appraising glare. "You are the Belgian, the detective, with the mustaches." Her accent cut the air like a blade. Poirot stood and bowed. "Madame, at your service." She lowered her voice to a conspiratorial growl. "I have something to say, but not here. This evening, 7. The Green Salon, alone." With that, she swept away, trailing an air of battle. I gaped at Poirot, who merely smiled, folding his napkin with surgical precision. "Aha," he said under his breath. "So it begins." Outside, the snow battered the glass, cold and wild. Inside, the hotel shimmered with anticipation. Somewhere amid the elegance, the games of state and shadow had already begun, signalled by a glance, a whisper, a cup held in the wrong hand. Chapter 2. The Green Salon. I have long believed that Poirot, despite his fussy habits and disdain for English breakfasts, positively thrives on intrigue. It is his oxygen, his elixir. The moment Countess von Hohenberg swept away from our luncheon table, he seemed to straighten, not merely in posture, but in spirit. His eyes gleamed, his mustaches twitched. He dabbed his fingers delicately with his napkin, as though preparing for surgery. "I suppose you'll be keeping this appointment?" I asked, as we returned to the lounge. "But of course, Hastings, you're not worried. She may be unbalanced." She seemed rather fierce. Poirot smiled gently. "No, mon ami, she is only Austrian." That evening, at precisely 5 minutes to 7, Poirot adjusted his pocket square, examined his moustache from 3 angles, and made his way to the Green Salon. I regrettably was not invited. He had insisted that I remain behind and occupy myself with the gin-rummy ladies, which I did out of loyalty, if not enthusiasm. When Poirot returned just after 8, he found me in the reading room, cornered in a one-sided conversation with Miss Lydia Apprentice, a retired schoolmistress from Tunbridge Wells, who had been detailing the many injustices of the Swiss rail timetable. He extricated me swiftly and suggested a brandy by the fire. Once we were comfortably seated, he began to speak low and measured, as though recounting the moves of a particularly delicate chess match. "She is a remarkable woman, Hastings," he said. "Countess Adele von Hohenberg, 78 years old, a face like a falcon and a mind like a razor. She knew the Empress Elizabeth personally. Sisi, the very one. She says the woman calling herself Countess von Schwartz is not of noble blood. In fact, she believes she is not Austrian at all." "And the real Countess?" I asked. Poirot hesitated. "There are whispers she died abroad some years ago, Cairo perhaps, but there is no official confirmation." "Well, people do change over time." Poirot shook his head. No, not the way one walks, Hastings. Not the tilt of the head, not the gestures bred from birth into the bone. The Countess was precise on this point. The so-called von Warts performs aristocracy like a stage role. I remained skeptical. Even if she's an impostor, that doesn't make her a criminal. No, but then there is the matter of the ambassador. I leaned forward. You saw the luncheon. De la Roche is no fool. He has risen through diplomacy with caution and care, and yet he allows himself to be charmed, conveniently charmed, by a woman who speaks little, reveals less, and appears from nowhere. Poirot paused, then added, The countess believes she is here with purpose, and that purpose, Hastings, may not be romantic. I thought about it. Espionage, perhaps, or blackmail, or something more subtle still. There are rumors of a letter-sensitive correspondence between France and Austria that has gone missing. Only a few knew of its existence. The countess believes Delarose may have spoken of it to the wrong person. I felt the stirrings of excitement. No murder, thank heaven, but enough mystery to satisfy even Poirot's appetite. Did she say what she wanted you to do? To observe quietly. She does not wish for scandal. She merely wants certainty. And if the woman really is a countess, then no harm is done. But if she is not, then we must know who she is, what she wants, and why she chose this hotel, this week, and that man. Poirot sat back and steepled his fingers. I have already noted 6 irregularities in her behavior, he added softly. 6? Good Lord, what are they? He held up 3 fingers. 1, her accent. It is flawless, but it is the accent of the stage, not the court. 2, her walk. As the countess noted, it is studied, not innate. And 3, he paused, tapping his temple, the way she holds her, wine glass. By the bowl, not the stem. A small thing, yes, but no true aristocrat would ever warm her claret. He smiled. The other 3 can wait. We must proceed with method. He sipped his brandy, his eyes half-lidded. Outside the tall windows, snow fell steadily over the frozen lake. Inside, the lounge shimmered with the soft lights of chandeliers, the clink of glasses, and the rustle of silk gowns. The Countess von Arz was nowhere to be seen, but I had no doubt she too was watching. Chapter 3. A telegram and a glove. It was the following morning when events took their first noticeable turn. Poirot, in one of his rarer moods, rose before 9 and requested breakfast in the lounge. For strategic positioning, he said with a wave of the hand. I joined him somewhat later, chilled from a morning stroll and muttering about the foolhardiness of Alpine winds. Poirot, seated in a deep red velvet armchair by the window, was delicately slicing the crusts from a quaison. She descended at 8:47 precisely, he said without looking up, in lavender again, but a darker tone. A sign. Hastings. One does not alter one's hue of mourning lightly. I glanced toward the staircase, though the Countess was no longer in sight. The fire crackled comfortably. A maid passed by with a silver tray and a sheepish dachshund in tow. Poirot continued. She took coffee in the conservatory, where she was met by Monsieur Bellini, the pianist who fancies himself something of a poet. He quoted something mockish about violets. She responded in fluent Italian, though with a Lombard inflection. You speak Italian now? I asked, taking my seat. Enough to know when it is not spoken by a Tolian countess. Couldn't she simply be well-ravelled? Poirot raised one eyebrow. She could be, but she claims in her hotel record to have come directly from Vienna, yet she speaks as one who lived long in Milan. Her accent betrays her subtly but distinctly. He poured my coffee with the air of a man adding another bead to a string of pearls. We were just finishing breakfast when Mademoiselle Claire Rena, the hotel's receptionist, approached with a slightly anxious look. "Pardon, Miss Poirot," she said, offering a polite half-curtsy. "A telegram arrived just now for Madame von Schwartz." Poirot looked up instantly alert. "And yet, Mademoiselle, you mentioned it to me." Claire hesitated. I thought, well, it may be nothing, but the message was visible when the clerk brought it from the telegraph office. He opened it by mistake, thinking it was Miss Rest. I saw it only for a second, but it struck me as strange. She leaned in, glancing about. It was coded, or at least peculiar, a string of numbers followed by a phrase, 14311. The mountain does not bow to the flower. Poirot sat very still. Mercy, mademoiselle. Did she seem disturbed on reading it? She didn't open it. What? She took it without a glance, folded it in half, slipped it into her glove. Her glove? Claire nodded. The left one. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Tribune, you are most observant, mademoiselle. Claire hesitated, glanced once more around, then added softly, there was something else, though I'm sure it means nothing. Poirot leaned in. The smallest clue can unravel the greatest mystery. The white orchids, she whispered. She insisted they be placed in the conservatory before breakfast, said they reminded her of her childhood in Baden. I frowned. Orchids. What significance could white orchids possibly have? Pooh paid no heed to my puzzlement. Trebam, let us hope your discretion is as keen as your observation. Claire's cheeks flushed pink. She curtsied again and slipped away. I turned to Poirot. But why didn't she read the telegram immediately? He answered without hesitation. Because she already knows its contents. The numbers are a code she has memorized, and the phrase, "The mountain does not bow to the flower," is a prearranged signal. The orchids may be yet another sign, perhaps a test. I frowned. But to what purpose? Poirot's voice dropped to a whisper. That, Hastings, we shall soon discover. That afternoon, Poirot embarked on what he called a promenade social, by which he meant a slow and deliberate circuit of the public rooms, nodding politely to various guests, inquiring after their health, and observing everything with surgical precision. I trailed behind him, feeling rather like a valet without a livery. Near the billiards room, we passed the Italian pianist Bellini, who was staring intently at a crossword and muttering into his moustache. Poirot greeted him with exaggerated cheer. "You are fond of puzzles, I'm sure." Bellini looked up, startled. "Ah, just a pastime, something to keep the mind occupied." Poirot's gaze lingered a moment, but of course, the mind must have its occupation, otherwise it wanders into mischief. From there, we entered the reading room, where two Russian ladies were embroiled in a whispered debate over the local schnapps. Poirot ignored them entirely and led me to the conservatory. There, seated amid orchids and snow-bright sunlight, was the Countess Art. She was not alone. Leaning toward her with an expression of studied concern was Ambassador Delaros, his fine silk cravat slightly askew as if in the midst of emotional disclosure. She listened, poised, unruffled. Her gloved hands rested lightly on a closed book, unread. Pooh whispered, "Observe the left glove." I did. It was slightly creased, as if concealing something stiff within. At that moment she turned her head slowly, deliberately, and her gaze passed over us. She did not smile nor frown, but she saw us. Of that I was certain. "Now," Poirot said, leading me away, "let us discuss the flowers." I blinked. "The what?" "The orchids. Hastings. The lady asked for white orchids to be placed here yesterday morning." "Why? I suppose she likes them." "She does not. She has not once looked at them. No, they are not for her pleasure. They are a prop, a signal to someone else in this hotel that the operation has begun." He paused, his gaze distant. "Or perhaps they are something more, a trademark, the calling card of the man behind her, a man with, I suspect, a flair for the dramatic. She did not order them for herself, Hastings. She ordered them for him." I shrugged helplessly. Poirot sighed. "No matter. We are assembling a portrait piece by piece. Let us call it La Comedienne Masque, the masked actress." That evening, after dinner, lamb with rosemary, which Poirot pronounced acceptable but uninspired, we returned to the lounge. The Countess had retired early, as had Delaroche. Bellini was playing something wistful on the piano, and then with a rustle of skirts and the faint scent of lavender, Countess von Hohenberg appeared beside our armchairs. She was once quite the figure in Viennese salons. Poirot whispered as she approached, known for denouncing corruption. Not a woman to be threatened lightly, nor easily ignored. She did not ask to sit. She simply did. "Well," she asked Poirot, "have you seen enough?" Pooh inclined his head. "I have seen enough to ask 2 questions." "Good," she said. "Then ask them, and I shall tell you if I know the answers. First, has Ambassador de la Rue been compromised before? Once in Lisbon, a dancer with imperial leanings." Poirot smiled. "Second, what, madame, is the significance of the phrase, 'The mountain does not bow to the flower'?" For a moment, the old countess was silent. Then, in a voice low and grave, she said, "It is a signal, a coded phrase used by a particular circle in Vienna, a society of monarchist loyalists who have not accepted the new democratic tide. It means, you are not to make contact. You are being watched." Pooh's eyes narrowed. "Mercy, madame. That tells me everything I need to know." She rose. "Then I shall retire. And may I say, Miss Poirot, do not wait too long. The flower bends easily, but the mountain may break." She disappeared into the shadows with the quiet grace of an old queen retreating from court. I turned to Poirot, but that does not make sense. She is making contact with Delarose, with Bellini. "Ah, but you see it backwards, mon ami," Poirot murmured. "It is not an order she is disobeying. It is a warning she has received. Her superiors are telling her that her movements are known. That is why she is acting with such speed. She is not being cautious. She is running out of time. You know what's going on, don't you?" He gave a slight nod. "Yes, Hastings, I know." I leaned closer, and he smiled. "Tomorrow," he said, "we take action." Chapter 4. Smoke in the snow. The morning dawned crisp and blindingly white, the snow outside casting a pale glow into the ornate corridors of the grand Alpine palace. Inside, Hercule Poirot was already impeccably dressed and seated beside the fire, sipping hot chocolate with the intensity of a man conducting an investigation inside his teacup. "Hastings," he said, without looking up from his breakfast tray, perfectly symmetrical as always. "Today the game ceases to amuse. It begins to demand." "Demand what?" I asked, still rubbing sleep from my eyes. "Action, precision, and perhaps, at last, a confrontation." Before I could reply, Mademoiselle Renard tapped lightly at the door. She stepped in, eyes wide with nerves, and extended a folded note. "No name, no room number," she whispered. "It was in the post tray, but the concierge believes it was meant for you." Poirot took the envelope, turned it once in his hands, and opened it with his paper knife. He read silently, then passed it to me. Schwartz died in Cairo, 1926, but not before she wrote it down. The letter survives. Ask the old woman. Who would send this? I asked. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Someone who wishes to remain hidden, yet also to direct the play. A whisper from the wings. Hastings. Later that morning, with Claire's assistance, we descended into the hotel archives. There, among brittle ledgers and curling paper, Poirot found what he sought. A guest book dated January 1924. "Voila," he murmured. "The true Countess von Watz. She stayed here in 1924. Suite 212. Claire leaned. "Over. I remember this name. She kept to herself, elegant, cold. She left Vienna soon after, didn't she?" Poirot nodded. "To Cairo. Yes, but look here. Her signature." He tapped the page. Note the handwriting. Confident, slanted to the right. The downstrokes carry weight on the inward pull, a classic mark of a right-handed writer. The loops of her capital S are clockwise and firm. "Hastings, this is not mere scribble. This is a mirror of upbringing." Claire tilted her head. "Could someone forge that?" "Not easily. Not left-handed." I blinked. "Left-handed." Poirot smiled. "Our countess, the one upstairs, drinks wine with her left hand." Not just casually, Hastings instinctively. She holds the glass by the bowl, warms it without realizing, and tilts it with perfect muscle memory. I observed it on her first evening. And now we know the real countess was right-handed, I said. Just so. The impostor may imitate the title, the tone, even the manners, but handedness that is written into the body like a signature. We found Countess von Hohenberg on the upper balcony wrapped in shawls, gazing across the ice-rusted lake. When we relayed the contents of the anonymous note, she did not seem surprised. She did send me a letter, she said quietly, from Cairo. It arrived days after her death was announced. I never understood how it reached me so late. She feared betrayal. She asked me to keep it hidden. Poirot stepped forward. You knew Helena Schwartz personally? No, she said, shaking her head. We never met face to face, but we corresponded for years. She reached into her shawl and withdrew a small, worn notebook. In 1924, I published an essay on the corruption and decay at the heart of European diplomacy. Helena read it and sent me a letter of admiration, a rare gesture from someone of her standing. From that moment, a correspondence blossomed. Our letters were passionate, intense. Two women trapped by the expectations of their stations, hoping to influence the course of events in our own ways. I raised an eyebrow. So why didn't you meet? Count von Hohenberg gave a sad smile. We planned to in Vienna, but Helena's health declined suddenly. She claimed she needed quiet and left for Egypt shortly after. That was the last I heard, until news of her death came months later. Then why have you not exposed the impostor? I pressed. If you knew someone was using Helena's name falsely. Von Hohenberg sighed. I was caught between loyalty and doubt. If I spoke out prematurely, I risked ruining a woman who might be innocent. If I waited, I risked losing the letter, and worse, the truth. Poirot extended a hand. May I see it? Without a word, she produced the letter, yellowed with age, written in a bold but agitated hand. Poirot read it in silence. His face darkened. She names Delarue, he said at last. She claims he sent a letter, unguarded, impassioned, and politically foolish. She was asked to destroy it. She did not, and shortly after she died. She feared it was a trap, said the Countess. Men came to her, monarchists. She thought they wanted the ambassador's correspondence. She refused to part with it, fearing both sides. Poirot folded the paper carefully. Our Countess von Schwartz does not seek mere identity. She seeks leverage, a weapon, and she uses beauty, mystery, and a borrowed title to get close to it. Do you think she is working alone? I asked. Poirot was silent. Then I think she serves a purpose larger than herself. We left the Countess as the bells tolled one. Poirot said little as we crossed the corridor, his thoughts moving like pawns across a board. She will make her move tonight, he said finally. She cannot afford to wait. She must act while she believes we know only fragments. By late afternoon, Poirot had arranged with Claire to have a sealed envelope left on Countess von Hohenberg's estoire. Inside a forged signature of the ambassador, a vague reference to the original letter, and a careful replica of a Cairo date stamp. A fake? I asked. Poirot smiled. A mirror, Hastings, one she cannot resist looking into. At 5, he dispatched 2 notes, one to Delaros asking him to remain visible that evening, the second more curious to the Italian pianist Bellini. You suspect Bellini? Not of wrongdoing, but of proximity. That evening the grand Alpine palace glittered as though nothing had changed. The pianist played Chopin. The fire hissed, conversation hummed like bees behind glass. But everything had changed. Poirot and I took our seats in the corner of the lounge, watching the corridor that led to the private suites. Delaros lounged near the hearth, visibly trying to appear at ease. Bellini retired early, and the lady in lavender tonight wore no lavender. She emerged at precisely 10:08, cloaked in black from head to heel, a small reticule at her side. She is prepared to vanish, Poirot murmured, or to strike. She walked quickly, not toward the lobby, She turned left toward Countess von Hohenberg's suite. "Come, Hastings," quietly. We followed. By the time we reached the door, the lock had been picked. It hung slightly open. Inside, the woman stood at the escar, gloved, composed. In her hand, the decoy envelope, her brow furrowed, a crease of doubt, then realization. "I see," she said softly. "It was never here." "It was never yours to find," Pooh replied. She turned. "Will you call the police?" "No," Poirot said. "You are not a common thief. You are an emissary for a cause that cannot afford scandal, and I do not trade in scandal." She seemed to relax until he added, "But Countess von Hohenberg may not be so forgiving." Her hand tightened. "I came to protect Europe," she said, "to prevent the wrong hands from grasping the levers." "No, madame, you came to control them. That is what your masters do through whispers, through blackmail, through masks." She looked at him. Then, with a strange, sad finality, she tore the envelope in two. Pooh did not flinch. "A forgery," he said. "But your intent was real. You drank your wine with your left hand, but the true Countess von Wartz, as her own letters confirm, was right-handed. That was the first crack, the rest merely confirmation." She did not flinch or run. Instead, a strange calm settled over her. "You are very clever, Monsieur Poirot." She gave a small, humorous smile. "A detail. In the end, it always comes down to a detail." She looked from Poirot to me, her gaze clear and unwavering. "I did not do this for money. I did it for a world that is dying, a world of order, of tradition, of kings. The man you will hunt next, Leopold, he believes in that world. He gave me a purpose when I had none. He gave you a role in a tragedy not of your own making," Poirot corrected gently. "He uses idealists like you as his props, and men like Delarue as his victims." Her composure finally broke, not with fear, but with a flash of passion. "Victims. Men like Delaroche are the disease. They sold their birthright for a hollow republic. Leopold is the cure." She tore the forged letter in two, not with sad finality, but with a sharp, defiant rip. She let the pieces fall to the floor. "It was never about one letter, monsieur. It was about who still remembers what Europe has lost." She passed us silent as smoke and disappeared into the dark. "She'll leave tonight," I said, "and be gone." "Yes," Poirot said, gazing out at the snow, "but the shadows she serves do not leave so easily." A long silence. Then Poirot turned from the window. "Tomorrow," he said softly, "we expose the whole of it." He tapped his temple. "But first, we must find the man who sent the note." Chapter 5. The Ambassador's Confession. The next morning, I found Poirot already seated at the breakfast table, not with his usual egg and toast, but with an untouched cup of chocolate and a stare that could carve granite. "She is gone," he said without looking up. "Checked out at 6:12 a.m. A hired sleigh, no forwarding address. Then, it's over," I said, a wave of relief washing over me. "The impostor has fled." Poirot's moustache twitched, a sure sign of dissent. "No, Hastings. The actress exits, but the play remains. We are no longer pursuing a false countess. We are pursuing the director of the performance." He tapped the folded anonymous note that still lay on the table between us. "And someone inside this hotel still holds the script. Our first visit was to Signor Bellini. The pianist answered, his door blur-eyed in yesterday's cravat, smelling faintly of brandy and regret. He looked far older in the sharp morning light. After only a few pointed questions from Poirot, his composure crumbled. "I was told only to watch," he confessed, sinking onto a dean, to listen for the phrase from the telegram. "The mountain does not bow to the flower. If I heard it, I was to report who said it and to whom." "To whom did you report?" Pooh pressed gently. Bellini shook his head. "I never had to. I received a second message yesterday telling me my task was complete. A man in Milan hired me. I never knew his name, just instructions and a generous fee. Pooh's eyes narrowed. You are being used, monsieur. A piece of furniture moved and polished for a purpose you cannot see. I believe, however, you have one final role to play. As we left the pianist's room, Mademoiselle Renard intercepted us in the corridor, her expression a mixture of duty and conspiracy. My Poirot, she whispered, I have been thinking about the note you received, the one about Cairo. Yes, mademoiselle. It was not delivered by the postman, and it was not in the telegraph deliveries. I have checked the logs. It was placed in the internal mail tray by hand. It must have come from a guest or a member of the staff. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Mademoiselle, your assistance has been invaluable. He turned to me as she hurried away. The note was a whisper from the wings, Hastings, and it could only have come from someone with intimate knowledge of the affair. Someone who knew of the real Countess's death, her letter, and her connection to Countess von Hohenberg. He paused. The list of such people is exceedingly short. In fact, it contains only one name we have not yet accounted for. We found Ambassador Delaros in the smoking lounge attempting to read a newspaper with an air of forced calm. Poirot did not waste time with pleasantries. Miss Ambassador, Poirot began, his voice low but clear. I have in my possession the final correspondence of the true Countess von Wartz, the letter she wrote from Cairo before she died. The ambassador's face, already pale, turned the colour of ash. The newspaper trembled in his hand. She spoke of you, monsieur, Poirot continued, his tone devoid of accusation, a simple statement of fact. She spoke of a politically impassioned letter. You sent her a letter she was meant to destroy, but did not. The monarchists, she feared, were not after her identity. They were after your words. Delaros sagged in his chair, the facade of the unflappable diplomat dissolving completely. I was a fool, he rasped, younger, more idealistic. He gave a bitter, mirthless laugh. I trusted her words, Missy Poirot, her ideals. Our entire acquaintance was conducted through correspondence. When this woman arrived, I had no face to compare hers to. I only knew that if I did not play along, the man who sent her would expose me. Tell me who he is, Poirot said. The ambassador took a shaky breath, his fear now mixed with a desperate desire to extricate himself. His name is Leopold. He was an archivist at the embassy in Vienna, a brilliant man, a fervent royalist. He believed the democratic government was a sickness rotting Europe from within. He vanished 5 years ago, presumed dead, but he is a master of shadows. He trained her. He is the one you seek. Poirot stood in silence for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the snow-covered lake outside the window. He turned from the window with a new fire in his eyes. They are waiting for us to make a move, Hastings. They do not know we have the real letter, but Leopold suspects his agent has failed. He will be desperate, so we shall oblige him. He spent the next hour with a very nervous Signor Bellini, giving him precise instructions. The pianist was to sit in the main lounge, appearing distressed, and allow himself to be overheard complaining to a confidant. One of the gin-rummy ladies would do nicely, that the dreadful old Countess von Hohenberg had boasted of hiding the valuable papers somewhere in the conservatory for safekeeping. But will he believe it? I whispered, once Bellini had departed to play his part. Poirot's smile was thin and sharp. Desperation is a powerful acid, mon ami. It dissolves caution. Leopold will not be able to resist one last attempt to seize his prize. He looked at the clock on the mantel. Tonight, Hastings, we do not wait for the final act. We set the stage for it ourselves. Chapter 6. An orderly conclusion. Midnight. The conservatory was a world apart, lit only by moonlight through snow-frosted glass. The white orchids loomed pale and spectral. Rows of ghosts lined up in silence. Outside, the world was sleep-bound. Inside, the trap was set. Poirot and I waited behind the high palms. Mademoiselle Renard was stationed discreetly in the corridor, ready to summon the hotel manager at Poirot's signal. Bellini, his part played, was back in his room under instructions to remain there, and then he came. Not 2 figures, but one, a man, short and spare, moving through the shadows with an unnerving confidence. He wore a fine wool coat, but his movements were those of a predator, not a guest. It was the archivist, Leopold. He was alone, his actress, having long since fled the stage. He was, as Poirot predicted, a desperate director, forced to take matters into his own hands. He did not attempt to pick a lock, but instead surveyed the room, his eyes scanning for a loose floorboard, a hollowed-out pot, the clumsy hiding place of an amateur. It was then that Poirot stepped out of the shadows. "Bonsoir, Mr. Leopold," he said, his voice calm, but carrying in the stillness. The man froze, his body coiling like a spring, his hand darted inside his coat. "The letter is not here," Poirot said gently. "It was never here." He gestured to the spectral flowers lining the room. "Though your signature is the white orchids, a touch of the dramatic." It was the first sign that told me we were not dealing with a lone impostor, but with a director waiting in the wings. Leopold's face was a mask of fury. His eyes flickered to the flowers, a silent admission of the truth. "You," he snarled. "But yes, you believed your agent had failed, and you could not resist one last effort to seize your prize, a prize you would use to shatter a government for the sake of a dead empire. That empire is not dead. It is sleeping," Leopold hissed, taking a step forward. "And men like you, petty meddlers, will not prevent its awakening." He lunged, not at Poirot, but toward the exit. But at that exact moment, as if on cue, a single sharp chord sounded from the grand piano in the adjacent lounge. It was jarring and loud, an alarm bell in the quiet of the night. Leopold stopped dead, realizing he was not only caught, but that his presence was now known to the entire hotel. He was exposed. Poirot gave a sad, small smile. "The performance is over, monsieur. The real letter was dispatched to the French embassy in Bonn this afternoon. Its contents will remain a state secret, and Ambassador Delarose has already tendered his quiet resignation. There is no blackmail left to use. There is no throne to restore. There is only you." The archivist stood defeated, the fanatic fire in his eyes dimming to ash. The passion that drove him was no match for the simple, orderly logic of the little man standing before him. An hour later, the local authorities arrived. There was no scandal, no headlines. Leopold was escorted away, his grand political theatre reduced to a sordid police matter. The snow fell gently as we boarded the early train from St. Moritz. As the grand Alpine palace receded behind us, Poirot opened his watch and adjusted it by a single minute. "There is one thing I still do not understand, Poirot," I said, as the train began to move. "That anonymous note you said at the time, we must find the man who sent it, but we never did. Who was it?" Poirot smiled, a twinkle in his eye. "But, of course, mon ami, we did. Think. It could not have been Delarose. He was a cornered animal, not a hunter. It could not have been Leopold, for why would he invite my interference? It could only have been sent by someone who possessed the knowledge, the motive, and the means." He leaned forward conspiratorially. "It was Countess von Hohenberg herself, a woman of immense pride and caution. She hired me to observe, but her patience wore thin. She feared the impostor would succeed, so she sent the note, an anonymous prod, to accelerate my investigation without fully committing her own hand. It was a test, Hastings, and by acting upon it, we proved ourselves worthy of her trust. 6 days, he said, and not a single case of indigestion." I smiled. "Not bad for a holiday." He tilted his head. "Next time, perhaps. Biarritz. Fewer monarchists, better Solmunerer." And with that the curtain fell. As the Alpine mists clear, Hercule Poirot unmasks the false Countess von Arts as an agent of monarchist plotter, Leopold, using her charm to steal Ambassador Delarose's compromising letter and restore old thrones through blackmail. The lady in lavender concludes with justice served, yet echoes of shattered illusions lingering like mountain shadows. We hope this ascent into high-stakes deception has gripped you, dear listeners. Did you suspect the Countess's hidden hand, Or were you charmed by her lavender veil? Share your thoughts below. If the lady in lavender has enthralled you, please like and subscribe to Whispers of the Night for more tales of suspense. Support our craft with a tip via Super Thanks or by joining our membership link in the description. Thank you for joining us, and until our next tale, may your nights be filled with intrigue and your days with clarity.